We had a very informative session last night on mental health, looking at how teachers can manage their own resilience while looking after the well-being of their pupils. Our next speaker, Siobhán O'Neill, is the Interim Mental Health Champion and Professor at Ulster University. Siobhán is going to talk about mental well-being as the foundation for learning, what we have learned during the pandemic that should guide our approach to mental health in schools in the future. Siobhán, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, just for context, just so you know what I'm dealing with, I'm a lone parent to a 3-year-old, and she's not sleeping. She's upstairs, so I'm downstairs trying to do this quite quietly while Granny waits outside her room to keep her away from me if she wakes up. And it's just so relevant to what I'm talking about. And hello to Michael as well. I'm just up the road in Craigban outside Claudy, so we're really close together in terms of location. So yeah, I'm the mental health champion for Northern Ireland, and one of my roles is working with the Department for Education and talking about mental health in schools and how we promote mental well-being in our young people, given everything that's going on around them. So what I always do when I start these talks is to just go into the neurobiology of stress, because it's actually really important to understand what I'm talking about here. So we have this lovely system in our bodies where when we are stressed, we have the fight or flight response, and it is as if animals are chasing us. And all of you guys are so aware of the effects of this. Let me put this onto the big screen. Right, there we go. Okay, so lots of things happen in our body. And the normal effects of the stress and the stress response. And these are things that we would have experienced during the first 2 weeks of COVID. And to be frank, I'm kind of experiencing them right now because of the anxiety about the child. So we're all familiar with this stuff about stress. We have difficulty thinking. It's really difficult to focus and think. And I certainly felt that at the start of the pandemic too. I had to prepare lectures, really hard to do that. Our bodies are geared up to be aggressive, to fight aggressors, and for survival. So we will have trouble relaxing, we'll be irritable, we'll be anxious, and we will feel threatened, and that's all absolutely normal. There are physical effects of the stress response as well, and that can be changes in energy. There's body tension where we're getting geared up to either fight or run away. We're restless, easily startled, difficulty eating, or sometimes eating too much to manage, to cope, to almost stockpile food for battle. And of course we can't sleep because we would get attacked if we're sleeping. So all of these things are happening to our body when we're stressed. Socially is really important too. We want to be on our own, we want to fight, we blame others, we're looking to see who we can blame for the situation that we're in, and we get into arguments. And of course, that's still happening a lot at this pandemic time. People are wondering who it is they can blame for this, and getting into arguments and being aggressive because, of course, we're all feeling very threatened. And it is exactly the same for a wee child whenever they're under pressure and stress. They have all of these responses as well. And a lot of them are coming into our classrooms in the morning. And I've heard your other speaker tonight talk about this as well, Karine, when the kids are coming, and this is often what's going on for them, and it is just not a good place from which to learn or flourish or to focus on anything that's school related. I use this little slide to try and explain what's happening in terms of the fight or flight response. And I describe it as like a circuit of survival. These things keep us safe. They allow us to survive. They are positive. It is a sign that our bodies are working properly. There are basically 3 different states that I would describe. The top one, safe and social, is the one where we want to be most of the time. That's where we want our children to be. We want them to be calm and engaged and connected and grounded, so that they can learn and they can have curiosity and they can have compassion because they can see other people's perspectives. Fight or flight is that stress response where they're vigilant, aggressive, shouting, angry. And then shut down, though, that's a trauma one. That's where they're almost so attacked that they freeze. If it was an animal, you would say it was playing dead. It's disconnected, dissociated. It's a sinking terror, hopelessness. And And our bodies and brains move from safe and social to fight or flight and to shut down regularly, certainly into fight or flight regularly, and shut down. If there's a lot of trauma, we can go into shutdown there as well. And what we want to do with the child who's coming to us to school is to bring that wee child right back up to safe and social. So it's important to note that the triggers to drop down these levels are subconscious. The child is not in charge of them. We're not in charge of them. There's cues from our environment that trigger this, very real triggers. And this is where the phrase triggering comes from, like a post-traumatic stress disorder. Someone is triggered by a sight or a sound or a smell. So it's a trigger that drops us right down. And whenever we move back up, that's emotional regulation. But if we experience repeated stress and trauma, it recalibrates these thresholds. And unfortunately, adversities, ACEs, whatever you want to call them, if there's too many of the wrong type of ACEs and not the right type of co-regulation to bring the kid back up, it's co-regulation that's required there. But if there's too many ACEs, we can get children who are in shutdown or fight or flight in a more or less permanent state. And it's no state from which to learn. And that manifests itself as behaviours that are difficult to manage. And those stages are recalibrated. So some kids will go into fight or flight really quickly, but that's because lots of really negative things have happened to them and their bodies responded in a particular way to that. I'm basically describing here a trauma-informed approach, and that is where we consider not what is wrong with you. We're not asking what's wrong with children whenever they behave in a way that we have described as bad. We're asking what's happened to lead to this behaviour, what's going on in the background. So this is a completely different way of looking at behaviour and addressing behaviour in the classroom. And when we're talking about that trauma-informed lens, it changes what we see. So if we try and view behaviour in relation to those three emotional states, then when we see violence and aggression and overreactions, actually that could be a child who's in fight or flight, who is stressed, who's anxious, and they will need co-regulation to bring them back up into safe and social. Equally with withdrawal and disengagement, that could be shut down. Inability to focus, again, it's a manifestation of stress. One more point that I need to make is about the fact that we are a social species. This is all of us here. We are like little meerkats. We have neuroception and we are tuned into the state of other mammals in our group, in our social group. Again, this is stuff that has kept us alive. We mirror the survival states from other mammals in the herd, particularly the herd leaders. The pack leaders are so important. And that's where the co-regulation takes place, because we're looking to the leaders to set the tone, to tell us whether or not we should be fearful. If there's danger, the leaders will let us know, and we're finely tuned with their body language, with their muscle tone, with their eye movements, so that we can pick up on that. So as pack leaders, teachers need to be in a state of safe and social in order to co-regulate those young people that they're dealing with and make sure that they're also in a state of safe and social. So calmness, safety, and a sense of well-being are so contagious, and stress and fight or flight is also contagious. So self-care is absolutely crucial, and that's something we have learned during the pandemic. When our leaders are calm, we can trust them. When they're modeling self-care, we know what we need to do. When there's chaos, it creates uncertainty and stress. A trauma-informed approach requires us to look at ourselves first and foremost. We need insight, self-awareness, and self-compassion, because at the end of the day, we are animals. This is our animal brain that's working. It is not our fault, and it is not the children's fault whenever they behave like that. It is about what has happened to us and what's happening to them. Once we get this awareness, we can start to take control of it and change it. My final wee points are based on this amazing guidance from the Northern Ireland branch of the British Psychological Society, Dr. Marie Hill. It's called Emotionally Regulate Before We Educate, and this is about psychological well-being in the approach to the new school day. And it is really about how fundamentally important that regulation process and that co-regulation that we're doing with our kids. We're setting the tone, we're giving them the right cues so that they can get up to safe and social. Absolutely fundamental in a pandemic. And if there's anything we can learn from this, it's how to bring that forward and how to recreate it online too, because that's really, really difficult. So these are my thoughts. those first few years right up to secondary school are time critical periods of development. They cannot be brought back, so we must keep schools and childcare open if it's at all possible. We need to address the digital divide to remove those inequalities, and we need to focus on co-regulation, because if we have a dysregulated adult, and if that adult's the pack leader, then we will have dysregulated children who will be unable to learn. So self-care for teachers first. Look after your teachers, look after yourselves. Maintain our social connections with the pupils and make sure that the pupils have that. It's really so important for their self-regulation and for their emotional development. We need clear lines of communication, those flat lines between staff, pupils and caregivers, so everybody knows what's happening and we can develop trust. And we need routine, structure and boundaries. All of us needed that at the start. When we don't have that routine, it becomes very chaotic and it's a really, really destabilizing situation. So as far as I'm concerned, the way forward needs to be about fostering resilience, emotional regulation and problem solving. But in order to problem solve, we need to be regulated and we need to be in safe and social. Then we can learn, then our children can learn, then things can get really good. We need to consider those transition periods as key points for co-regulation, for adjusting the tone and getting everybody back up into safe and social. So arrival, home time, break time, lunchtime, all points at which we need to get in there and set the tone and regulate the pupils. We need to create safe spaces for staff and pupils so that our environment itself is regulating, it's promoting that regulation that we need. We need trauma-informed approaches to behaviour management that recognise what has happened to that child and that recognises the emotional age of that child, which is not necessarily the same as the physical age, because the emotional age is impacted by trauma, adversity, and what's happening in the home, things that you have very little control over. In the mental health for schools framework, we talk about screening and referrals. That's absolutely crucial, and I am so conscious we are not there yet with that. We need the services there to back it up. Teachers are not psychologists. They're there for a completely different job, but they need to have the skills to be able to detect when there might be a problem and to refer a child on easily. We need to prioritise joy and play because they are fundamental to mental health, and they're absolutely crucial and key to learning. If you want to find out more about my job and my role, I've got a Facebook page, a Twitter feed, an email address, and you can even ask for a meeting with me, and I'm happy to oblige in Belfast or online. And there's a couple of other websites with information there too. So thank you for that, and happy to take any questions that you would have.
Thanks very much, Siobhán.